What's going on, YouTube? Thank you for heeding the Twilight's call and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing some cards from Commander Legends 2 that have garnered my attention. Originally this started off as being a top 10, but screw it, it's my channel, I'm bumping to 13 because I can, and that's how many have caught my interest. This list of cards are what I think are interesting in Commander. Note, I said interesting, not the most powerful, not the most expensive. I don't care about the pricing of cards as I don't collect them, I play them, and the values of my cards will decrease over time. And I really don't care much about the power level, as I wish I actually toned down power level in Commander as time goes on rather than keep increasing it so much. So this list is going to be more about cards that I think will make an impact in the format and personally delight me. So without further ado, and not in any real particular order, let's go ahead and do this. First up is going to be Tasha the Witch Queen. I already did a video on her a few weeks back and it garnered a lot of attention, and if you watch that video you'll know some of the things I mentioned to use with her, because stealing your opponent's stuff and beating them to death with them is way more fun than using your own stuff. I would not slot this into a deck with some other commander as the front face, because it's hard to build a deck around the whole stealing format and then hope you just draw her out of the deck. The next card that garnered my interest was Baba Lysaga Night Witch. I already did a video on her a couple weeks back as well. I really like things that sacrifice permanents for gain, and this one has a little bit of a twist where you have to sacrifice permanents of a different type to get the maximum value out of it. So I kind of like that extra little step, but then you get some good stuff out of it. As someone pointed out, the more stuff that you get in there that have multiple types, the less things you have to sacrifice in the first place. And one of the good cards that somebody pointed out to me later after I made the video was Mishra's Factory, because you can animate it to turn it into a man land that also counts as an artifact and a creature, so it actually hits all three types that you can then sacrifice it one time, hit the requirements for Baba, and then if you're running things like Crucible and Ramanap Excavator, like I mentioned in the other video, you can then just keep replaying it turn after turn and just kind of do a loop. For me, I would probably slot this in if you didn't want to build around her ability with either Corvault Fakehurst King or Mazrik Krull Death Priest. This gives them an on-command sacrifice engine that if you manage to get the 3 extra permanent types, you get her bonus as well, but if not, you're sacrificing 3 things, putting 3 counters on Corvault or putting 3 counters on all your stuff with Mazrik either way. Another card that got my attention and got my thoughts flowing is Nero Wild Mage. I love chaos decks. It's fun to kind of force the table to deal with wild, unpredictable effects like extra cards being drawn, spell effects going off at random, things like that. So this is actually kind of a personal possibility storm. So I love this kind of thing. Sign me up for it. She'll be in a deck likely with cards like Stolen Strategy, Sunbird's Invocation, and Possibility Storm itself, just to go maximum chaos. If you don't want to build around her as the star of a deck, which I'm going to do a video on that soon, you can slot her in as part of the 99 of another type of chaos deck, Arjun the Shifting Flame, which then, shuffles your hand back under the deck every turn. But if you want to feel more competitive with this, you could also slot her into Hinata Dawncrown and use the mana reduction on Hinata to kind of get, cheaper free stuff. Another thing I love aside from Chaos, I love mass resurrection spells, hence what the channel's name is after, Twilight's Call, of one of the very first mass resurrection spells in Magic that wasn't All Hallows Eve. So I have a great affinity for Ascend from Avernus. Most mass resurrection spells are in black. It's kind of the traditional color for it. So I like that this is not in black, for one, and 2, I like it being flexible as being an X spell, so you get rewarded for playing this later and later in the game to get bigger and bigger stuff back from your graveyard. This I also like because it gets back Planeswalkers, which most mass resurrection spells don't do outside of Command the Dread Horde, but at least this doesn't cost you a ton of life like Command the Dread Horde does. I'm going to slot this into my Teysa Karlov deck just to get back all the stuff I'm sacrificing for the death triggers, and then I can do it all over again. But this can also go in any white tilted deck as a field wipe recovery tool. Another thing I like in Magic is cloning things, and what's more fun than cloning your opponent's big nasty stuff? So that leads me into Elminster's Simulacrum. You got something big and nasty that I want a copy of too? Well, I'm going to cast this and steal one from every single opponent and put a copy into play. The best thing you can do with this is pair it up with token doublers like Doubling Season, Parallel Lives, things like that. And then you can get 2 copies of whatever you're making a copy of. But if you're going to do this, just make sure that you're not copying a legendary creature, because otherwise the legendary creature is going to die. Another way that you could go with this route is to use populate cards like Song of the World Soul, so you can repeatedly copy whatever you're copying from them. Again, make sure you're not taking legendary stuff so you can make copies. The main commander I would slot this into is Adrix and Nev Twincaster, since they have their own version of a doubling season built in. And in order to use the populate version of this deck, we're going to have to dig a little deeper, because all the populate abilities belong on either white, green, or green abilities for the most part. So if you're going to go that route and you want to have access to like the white populate cards, you're going to want to use something like Temet, Vizier of Noctimoon, which then synergizes with the tokens you're going to be creating anyways. So like if you have a big creature and then you have Temet, you can make that creature unblockable and just smash with it. If copying creatures isn't your thing, then let's try some spell copying with Storm King's Thunder. Usually you only get a single shot at a copy spell. This one, you pay X however many times you want to copy something, and then you just start wailing away with whatever spell you want to copy. So let's see, what kind of recommendations would we want to do this? How about we go simple to start? How about Lightning Bolt, since we're already in red? So you pay all but one of your red mana into the Storm King's Thunder, say 10 times. And then you plop a Thunderbolt or a Lightning Bolt in there, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey, here's 30 damage on the stack, and you just start lightning bolting everything in sight. You could burn down, 1 or 2 opponents, you could nuke the board, and whatever floats your boat. Or how about we go into a different color? Let's try Frantic Search. Copy a few of those, they cast and keep going off, you untap all of your lands by the time they're all done going through, and you'll have a nice fresh selection of cards that you can then cast because the lands got all untapped by the Frantic Searches. The possibilities are endless for this thing for anything you want to copy. I would slot this into a deck probably headed up by either Melek Izzet Paragon, since you're going to be copying spells anyways, or Niv Mizzet Perun, because you're going to want to copy like card draw spells and trigger him off repeatedly. Next up is a legend that cares about an ability that hasn't been in the game for a couple of years, Minthara Merciless Soul. It's been a hot minute since we've seen anything that cared about experience counters. With all the treasures that are floating around now, though, it shouldn't be hard to trigger her off and add to the experience count, or you can also double up on her experience ability by using some of the legends of the past that actually cared about the experience mechanics, such as Kelsian the Plague or Daxos the Returned, because as you use their abilities and triggers to get experience counters, it will stack up with anything that Minthara is doing as well. Daxos in particular could be a good synergy with her, because then as he creates creatures and you get more and more experience counters, those tokens you're creating with Daxos will get even bigger with Minthara around. Next up is one of the background cards from the new set that really got my attention, Inspiring Leader. The backgrounds are not just for pairing with a D&D legend that supports the mechanic, you can also run them in the main deck. And this one is really good if you're focusing on a commander that deals with token creatures such as Jennifer Jetmir II or Edgar Charmed Groom. You're going to be pumping out tokens in these decks, and Inspiring Leader makes those piddly little 1/1s and 2/2 creatures that are just kind of to real threats that have to be taken seriously. This leads into another legend that could take advantage of this same background. And the next one up is Khadira, Caller of the Small. Aside from creating one of the funniest creature types to hit a battlefield in a game of Magic, rabbits, come on, Khadira, Caller of the Small, gives us another token creating commander aside from like Jenny Faye. So now her ability is tied up into doing combat damage, much like Tana the Bloodsower. So we're going to have to build around that fact, so we can either make her unblockable with something like a Whisper Silk Cloak, or better yet, let's boost her power through the roof, so if they block her, she's going to trample on through and still make some damage and start getting the rabbits on the board. Philosophization is a good target for this. You can make her, into a 23/23, and good luck blocking that. Or Might Evokes, +7/+7. So if they're like, oh, I'll just block it, with a 3/3 and try to kill it, well, you give it +7/+7, all of a sudden you're going to trample on through and make 7 rabbits on top of that. Again, like with anything else, token doublers are great with her. And I will say this now, obligatory Monty Python and the Holy Grail references if you manage to kill your opponents with the bunnies. If you're not going to build around her as the commander, though, I would recommend slotting this into Jennifer Jetmir II or Reese the Redeemed, so you can start doubling up those rabbit tokens as you go through the game. Another background that really got my attention, and I'm planning on building around this, is Agent of the Iron Throne. Artifact strategies are already pretty strong in Commander, but there are very few that actually take advantage of them going to the graveyard and do loss of life triggers. Really, there's only 2 other cards that have ever been printed that have this kind of effect on them for artifacts. One is Disciple of the Vault, and the other is Marionette Master. Disciple of the Vault does 1 damage for every artifact going into the graveyard, and Marionette Master does damage equal to her power to a target opponent. So, Agent of the Iron Throne turns your commander into a cross-up of Disciple of the Vault and Zulaport Cutthroat, because it also makes creatures do the same thing too. So whenever a creature goes in the yard or an artifact goes in the yard, it's going to make your commander trigger and do damage. The most obvious commander for this is going to be Brea Ethereum Shaper, but that is, CDEH level power. Sometimes you don't want to go that route, and if not, and you want to go with a more artifact-centric kind of commander, I would recommend Seedry Galvanic Genius, or a less obvious one that doesn't necessarily have to go with artifacts, Vevictus Asmati the Dire, because you're going to be sacrificing permanents to him anyways as he swings, so you can start sacrificing either creatures or artifacts and start pinging to get extra advantage out of that. Next up is what I would call probably the big dumb red mythic that's probably not going to be worth a lot of money, but it's fun to mess around with, Balor. Your opponents are not going to be escaping this particular Balrog. I think my only disappointment here is it was not a black and red card for the Shadow and Flame reference from Lord of the Rings. Otherwise, I love this card. Even if they kill him as soon as he hits the table, some nasty stuff's going to happen to your opponents, and even better if he gets to live and start smacking your opponents around. If you got an opponent with a small hand you want to mess with, make them draw 3 and discard 3 at random to start chewing through their deck. If someone's got an annoying artifact, blow it up. If someone's like, oh, I'm going to be greedy and have no max hand size, hit them with the 3rd mode and sudden impact them in the face and make them pay for their greed. I personally would love to build around this, but I already have in Neheb the Eternal deck that I think I'm going to slot him into, and this is a threat in that deck you got to deal with. Because not only are you going to get the 5 damage off of him swinging into somebody, if someone's got a handful of cards and you sudden impact them with that, you're going to get even more mana off of Neheb. Yes please, me likey. Our list is rapidly coming to a close with our next to last card that I have that kind of gets my interest. It's one of the Ancient Dragons from the Mythic cycle in this set. And the only one I really want to try to build around in a deck is Ancient Gold Dragon. While all of the new Mythic Dragons in this set are great and they're cool things to put into your decks, this is the only one that really kind of piqued my interest. I love things that create tokens in Magic, especially in Commander, and this thing can create huge bursts of them out of nowhere, and it can get even better if you can manage to give this thing double strike. The dice roll trigger actually is off each instance of combat damage, so you'll get to roll 2 d20s if you give it double strike. This thing is Jennifer Jetmir's second's best friend. It's incredible with token doublers, and it combos with Dragon Tempest, as people have pointed out online. So if you manage to pull that off, you're likely one-shotting the entire board as long as you roll high enough on the d20. If you don't want to go, ultra mega combo out, the one thing I want to try is Divine Visitation to make all the 1/1 fairy dragons into 4/4 angels. So at least it gives my opponents a chance to, fight back and not die instantaneously. But if they don't manage to, I'm taking their heads off. The last card that's kind of piqued my interest, and it's mostly because I opened one in my pre-release kit, Miram's Sentinel Worm. With all the love of tokens, you didn't think I was going to not do this one, did you? I'm already in the process of building the deck. I'm going to do a video on it eventually. Coupling this with dragons, one of the coolest fantasy creatures in the history of Magic, D&D, and all fantasy literature, there's no way I'm not building this deck. I've said it earlier in the entries that mess with tokens. I love token doublers. This thing is going to love it too. You make a copy of a dragon, you have a token doubler, you get 2 copies. So then in essence, you're getting 3 copies of every dragon you play with 1 token doubler on the board. The only problem is, you're also going to paint a huge target on your forehead, and you're going to want ways to protect Miram to get him up and running as soon as you get him on the board. I would use things like Snakeskin's Veil, Darksteel Plate, and March of Swirling Mist. Once you're able to untap and start dropping dragons, your opponent's time in the game will be shortened significantly from that point on, especially with things that have haste such as Chaos Dragon, or if you have ways to grant them haste like Concordant Crossroads or Mass Hysteria. Alternatively, you could slot this into the Dragon just to add to its multitude of dragons if you want to go that route. So what do you think? Is there something here that shouldn't be in my list of interesting cards from this set? What interests you? Please let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.